Pope Francis is defending the Quran from blasphemy while allowing the cross to be profaned in urine. Joining us with the latest news from the Eternal City Church Militant Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomez. Jules, Pope Francis is condemning blasphemy against the Quran. What sparked this latest papal defense of Islam?
Brad, exactly a week ago on Wednesday, the first day of the season of Eid, an Assyrian Christian who now claims to be an atheist set fire to the Quran outside the central mosque in Stockholm, Sweden.
So what do we know about this Swedish person who burned the Quran, and exactly what do we know about his motives?
His name is Salwan Momika. He's a 37 Iraqi refugee. Now, he says that one reason, of course, we know that he is so anti-Islam, or at least what Islam has done to his whole set of people, his family, his clan. In 2014, remember, ISIS, Islamic State, stormed into the Nineveh plains and wiped out many Assyrian Christians. Women were raped, men were killed, etc., etc. And Salwan Momika then joined the Babylonian Brigades, a kind of Christian militia that was defending the Christians from the Islamic persecution. And he says that he wants to demonstrate and prove that freedom of speech is really alive and well in Sweden. And that is why he's done it. And if, he says, the government refused to let him do it, that would show that Sweden has bowed the knee to Islamic totalitarianism. And remember, the Swedish police gave him a permit for burning the Quran, although now they're backtracking and saying that a hate crime may have been committed.
Oh, what a strange story. He gets a pass from the Swedish police to do this. Also, just for the sake of the viewers, Jules, he is not a Christian, correct? He identifies as an atheist?
And now he identifies as an atheist, correct? But, you know, he's grown up and he's been an Assyrian Christian most of his life, which is why apparently he joined the Babylonian Brigades to defend his family and his clan.
Okay, so rolling into Pope Francis's take on this, how did Pope Francis respond to this event?
Well, Pope Francis said he was angry and disgusted at the Quran burning. He told the United Arab Emirates newspaper Al-Ittihad, I quote, "Any book considered holy should be respected to respect those who believe in it." And Francis went on to say, freedom of speech should never be used as a means to despise others, and allowing that is rejected and condemned. Very strong words indeed.
So how did the public at large react to the Quran burning and also to the Pope's defense of the Quran?
The 57 actually, Islamic countries around the world have raised their voices in protest. They're calling for a universal law on blasphemy, basically Sharia law to be imposed on the whole world, where nobody will be able to speak against Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, or the Quran, or anything Islamic. And remember, the Pope's close friend, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Sheikh Ahmed Tawidi, has also done something very similar. He has also called for a universal law that will prohibit people from speaking out or blaspheming against Islam.
I wish all that was in place when people who were Mohammedan were actually slaying the people in 2014 with that whole ISIS thing rolling through. And then in Nigeria and other places, I wish there was that unified voice speaking out against all of that, killing Christians around the world. Experts on Islam, Jules, would say that the Pope's defense of the Quran amounts to supporting Islamic Sharia law. Jules, you've actually taught about Islam in universities and theological colleges. What's your response to that?
Well, absolutely. If you read something by the great Islamic scholar Robert Spencer, or in fact, if you read works written by Bishop Michael Nazir, an Anglican bishop who is now a Catholic priest, you will see they talk about how the death penalty is mandated by all four Sunni schools of Islamic jurisprudence for blasphemy. The Hanafi, the Shafi'i, the Maliki, and the Hanbali school all recommend the death penalty both for men and women who blaspheme against the Quran. And what Pope Francis is doing is virtually okaying this Sharia law and its imposition on the whole of the Western world, the so-called free world. And that in itself is scandalous. People really need to recognize in the context, and in the Rome Dispatch, we explore the context, Brad, in the context of what's going on in the Islamic world, the persecution of Christians, and in the Western world. What Pope Francis is doing is virtually lighting the fuse that is going to blow up free speech and the freedom of Christians in the West.
Now, taking this into context, the Pope's latest defense of the Quran is really in marked contrast to his total non-defense of the cross being grossly blasphemed recently. Can you tell our viewers what happened regarding this about a week ago in the Vatican?
On June the 23rd, Pope Francis invited over 200 artists to the Vatican for the inauguration of the Vatican Museum's collection of modern art. Now, among those artists was one of the most blasphemous artists, who has ever lived, Andres Serrano, whose the most blasphemous exhibit was "Piss Christ." Forgive me, Lord, for even saying this and taking these words on my tongue. And this was a picture of the Lord Jesus Christ crucified, dipped in a jar of urine. At that time, Christians all over the world protested against it, but nothing was done. It continues to be exhibited. And Serrano has also exhibited other vulgar, blasphemous works, including a mockery of the Pietà, where his wife pretends to be Mary and poses with a large dead fish in her arms, who is supposed to be Jesus. Now, Francis not only welcomed this person, Serrano, and Pope-splainers on YouTube are twisting themselves into pretzels to tell us that Pope Francis did not know this person. But Serrano himself comes out and says, the way Francis welcomed him, I quote, "It was with a great mischievous smile." Francis clearly knew who this person was. And if you see the video of Francis welcoming him to the Vatican, to the audience, he not only shakes hands with them, smiles, but also puts his thumb up and says, as if to say, "You're doing a great job, man. Keep it up."
What would happen if the Catholic Church actually had this same death penalty in place, for desecrating the crucifix? Like that, it would just be light up the whole world. Jules, you touched on it briefly about the impact you believe moving forward that this green lighting of the international Islamic laws, including the death penalty, standing up in defense of the Quran and its religion. How do you see all this affecting the persecuted Christians in Islamic countries?
Brad, you just touched on the death penalty, and this is hugely significant because Pope Francis, as we all know, is against the death penalty and reversed centuries of biblical and Catholic teaching by changing the catechism and nullifying the death penalty. Now, this is ironic because he's supporting something that is going to be, provoking the death penalty in all four schools of jurisprudence in Sunni Islam. But how this is affecting the Muslim world is also catastrophic. because Muslims are already attacking Christians, particularly in Iraq. And the Syrian Christians and other Christians in Iraq have pleaded with Muslims. They've all been forced, by the way, not voluntarily, to issue statements saying that they don't agree with this protester, that they believe the Quran is a holy book, and that any attempt to blaspheme against it is, ought to be condemned. But remember again, Brad, our brothers and sisters in a country like Pakistan, S.T.B, the Catholic lady, if you remember, had been facing the death penalty for years because using this blasphemy law, a neighbor can just say, if the neighbor wants a revenge against you for some petty thing that you've done, the neighbor can just say, oh, I heard him blaspheming against Muhammad, or I saw him throwing the Quran on the ground, and you are in jail. And you can be hanged for this crime. And you rot in jail for years before justice is done, if ever. And these are the consequences of, some of the Pope's words and actions, I'm afraid.
Well, it seems like toleration is really a one-way street these days. Christ, Catholics, and all things Christian are currently targeted, often by Muslims, and little is said, even by church leaders. Then a single instance of one lunatic doing something against Islam, and the whole world's outraged. As Christ said 2,000 years ago, if they've persecuted me, they will also persecute you. Jules, thank you so much for your report and your insights.
Thank you, Brad.